let's say you're baking. Not necessarily like a cake. I mean, the shit that I bake, it's usually just the same thing. I add differing ingredients all the time. You know, I switch up the ingredients, but it's not really identifiable. It's certainly not a cake. I think it could be most closely associated to what you might consider to be like a gigantic cookie. I call it plops. It's basically just a bunch of ingredients thrown into, you know, general mixture. I like to switch up the mixture of like I use flour and corn muffin mix. I mix those two together, and it turns out really well. The texture is beautiful. It's thick. What I'm doing with it, essentially what I'm making and what I'm usually going for, is something that is really hearty and thick and just packed with fucking nutrients. And we're gonna get into why that has to do with the Kundalini training. It's a part of the Kundalini training, and it's very purposeful in that regard. But one thing that I need for you guys to know about me, especially this one, we're getting back to Innocent Baku now here again, but obviously everybody, one thing that you guys need to know about me, that honestly, if you were familiar with how spot casting worked and you were like practiced in it, you knew how to work it, this one factor, this one value could allow for you to control my entire life from your phone. You don't even have to fucking be near me. But one thing that everybody needs to know about me that is like the most prescient and bottom line statute of my very existence is that I am a fucking peanut butter fanatic. And it's not just because peanut butter is sweet and sexy and excellent. It's because there are properties to it that, you know, we're gonna get into the dietary factors, but peanut butter is one of the best things. Peanut butter and potatoes are gonna be really the best fucking things for you to eat if you're moving along this track. Anyways, so I got a trail mix that has the little peanut butter cups in it. Now, if I'm baking this, am I just going to dump this fucking trail mix in there? That's what most people are going to do. They're going to go ahead and just, they'll you know, get prepackaged shit and they'll dump it all together and just bake, and it'll turn out however it turns out. Maybe there are mistakes made, who knows. But certainly doesn't come out perfect, does it? Now, if you do want it to come out perfect, you're going to have to take into account several considerations. Like, firstly, this has dried cherries in it. Most of the time it has dried cranberries, but this one has dried cherries in it. Those cherries, they're excellent. They're really good. They have like a salty taste to them. Like dry, the texture is perfect. They're chewy. They're wonderful. They're just excellent fucking little fruit snacks. However, having practiced in this, that is to say having baked these over and over again, you know in advance that if you put these cherries in there, once you put them through the process, you stick them in there and you heat them up and you have them with the rest of the shit that you put together, the milk and the egg and whatnot, those cherries, they're going to soak up the moisture and they're going to pretty much return to being just regular ass cherries. They're no longer dried cherries. They're going to poof out and they're going to blow up. Firstly, they're going to take up a lot of space. That's one consideration. B, they're going to get juicy and soft, which on one hand, it's not going to hold together very well. The structure of it's going to fall apart because of those cherries. They're going to take up a lot of space. And on the other hand, they're going to be, if you like to eat shit straight out of the oven like I do, they're going to be hot as a motherfucker, like even hotter than I can tolerate. So what you do is you remove those cherries, right? Because they're not going to work. You can eat the cherries on the side. They're good as is. You know, they're going to change. There are going to be differentiations that occur in the structure and the component, really, the component factor of them by putting them through that process of baking it all together, mixing it all together, working it all together, applying heat, applying a charge. So you remove those, and then also, you know, the peanut butter cups, I'm going to want a lot more of those, especially up top, so I'm going to situate those, you know, as needed. I'm going to remove a lot of the peanut butter cups. I'm going to use the almonds because they're fantastic, but cashews I'll discard just because I don't really like them so much, you know, and then I'll use the peanut butter cups and try and spread those on top. So basically, what I'm doing here is I'm taking everything and I'm using apples. I'm going to put the apples in. Chop up the apples in tiny, tiny pieces. You can't put big pieces of the apples because again, they're going to soak up the moisture. When they get soft, they're not going to adhere properly unless they're in tiny, tiny pieces. So it'll fall apart. You have to be conscious and aware of all the little components you're putting in, and most especially you have to be conscious and aware of what alterations are going to occur in the process of cooking it. This is essentially the same thing that you are doing in life. You have a value system, and values that you put into your system, they're going to alter, they're going to go through alterations when you put them through the fire of life, through the furnace, when you get into the shit, and you get in trouble, especially when you get scared, when you get hurt, when bad things happen and you go through rough times, the values you have in your system are going to go through alterations that can have extensively negative effects, like seriously damaging impacts upon your life. And, you know, if you have a spotter, fortunately you do, somebody who's been through all of this shit before, they can warn you in advance what kind of alterations are likely to occur. They can tell you what the probabilities of certain things happening, and basically you are afforded the opportunity to go ahead and alter your value system accordingly. And what you want to do there, essentially, is you're going to be picking and choosing what values you want, because ultimately you're baking a cake, which is, or not a cake, but you're baking a personality, you're making a person. And you're going to carefully decide what values you want in, what values you don't want, how you want those values to be negotiated, you know, where you want the peanut butter cups. And this is something that a spotter learns to do. Essentially, a spotter learns to see what values are in their system, be aware of it, and make use of them properly, associate and situate them properly, negotiate their value system, and create a desirable person, you know? But this value system, that's in your subconscious. That is your subconscious. So most people are not aware of it. They just dump the fucking bag in there. They take life as it comes, and they react to it. They're not creating themselves. They're not paying attention to what's making up their persona, and you know, they're not situating their own ingredients. For the most part, that subconscious is just filling up with shit that they're totally unaware of. So, what's happening here, you know, the reason why you want to be aware of this and what's actually transpiring is that subconscious, that subconscious person, that essentially is what makes up the perpetual self, is just all of everything remembered. It's the part of you that remembers everything, and that is to say, not that it remembers all the memories going back, like maybe in the past lives or what have you, but that it is aware of everything that is happening now. Like all the values that are in your system, it sees them, it understands them, but you don't. And what's actually happening here, I should like to speak to, firstly, before I go into that, is, you know, essentially, when we were talking about the Buddha was trying to explain this. The Buddha was trying to explain exactly what I'm getting at here. And Carl Jung was getting at this with the collective unconscious. You know, these guys, essentially, Buddha, maybe even Jesus, they were kind of like the Bruce Lee or the Musashi. I don't know if you're familiar with Musashi. Musashi was a samurai, technically. He was a Ronin. He was a samurai without a master, a wandering samurai rogue. And basically, just like Bruce Lee did, Musashi did the same thing. The ideology they had regarding martial arts and combat was that pretty much they said, fuck the tradition. That is to say, fuck the fancy, artful bullshit. Fuck all the showman shit. Just get to the fucking point. Move fast, hit hard. You know, just take charge and take action and make shit happen on the spot. You know, put your full self into it and really rock that shit. And Musashi, he would walk into battles with people who were like these crazy, exalted samurai warlords who were like, you know, held in such high regard. He would walk up and he would take them the fuck down, just murder them straight out. And of course, I'm not promoting or endorsing murder. That's terrible. Can you imagine like somebody just chopping somebody up with this fucking katana? That's crazy. But that's what he did, and he did it not just because like he had no real reason to be doing this other than to show them that your tradition and the way that you engage in this artful fancy sportsmanship and such, and you have these particular routines that you follow, the way that you have these habits in play, these routines, is holding you back, and it's making you vulnerable. And pretty much, this guy's gonna one guy's gonna walk into combat, and he's gonna hold his sword, and he's gonna do some kind of twisty dance, and he's gonna hold a certain form, and he's gonna expect Musashi to react based on the form he's using, because that's how they did it. But Musashi's just like, fuck you, and sees an opening and takes it. He doesn't fuck around. Bruce Lee did the same thing. Bruce Lee was trying to teach that ultimately the best way to do things is your way, and that pretty much you can just throw yourself into the battle and really fucking like rock some shit. Bruce Lee was teaching that fuck the old ways, fuck the showmanship, fuck the artful fancy showmanship, and just get down to it. Take every opening you get, move fast, hit hard. That's what he was saying. Now, the Buddha, and maybe even Jesus, but most especially the Buddha, was getting at that in a metaphysical view. He was saying that, he was trying to show us that everything that we consider to be like traditional aspects of our spirituality and our personality, essentially, it's all bullshit. It's all a hoax. It's just we're holding on to these ideas that are essentially like ghosts haunting us. The whole world is haunted by these past ideas of traditions and cultural inferences and just ideologies, that frameworks that we hold on to, just like religion is the best example, obviously, getting back to religion again. Just holding on to these rule sets and these considerations that are, in most cases, just flat out, exceptionally obvious bullshit. Like, total ridiculous nonsense, but these people are going to cling to it, and they're going to refuse to acknowledge any truths that disagree with it, because their beliefs, they misidentify themselves with their beliefs, and they actually, the belief that they're having, really, the ultimate overall belief, is they believe that they are their beliefs. They believe that this tradition defines them, and that's not the way. We were just talking about this in the Remnants program, and a friend of mine, Lauren Hall, she posted something saying that there are thousands of religions, and any way you take it is, your way is the right way. If it works for you, make use of it, and it doesn't matter what religion you are. And of course, she's perfectly correct on that. My response to her was that I think that navigation in and of itself is the right way, that as the Buddha would have said, like where the Buddha talked about the ego, people thought that the Buddha was talking about, the ego is some negative force that you have to fight against, or something that you have to avoid, or something that you have to, reproach for the most part. That's what people thought the Buddha was saying, because the Buddha was saying you have to discard the ego. So they were thinking, well, the ego is this evil thing that we're fighting and we have to get rid of it. No, what the Buddha was saying is that the ego is an illusion. It's not real. The traditions are illusions. These are all ghosts just haunting ourselves and making up an entity of us that is uncontrolled and uncontained, really. Now, getting to this consideration, as we've stated, looking at time in reverse, that we're witnessing time happening it backwards, that's getting to the bottom line consideration, that the basic factor of all of it is that we consider our subconscious, the subconscious value system, we consider that to be the subconscious, the hidden factor beneath it, and that we are the conscious aware factor, while we're only aware of, minuscule portions of it. We're only aware of minuscule portions of everything that's happening. We can't see a lot of the light that's we can't, there's a lot of things we can't hear, tones, there's, wavelengths of light we can't see, there's just radio waves and just shit all over the fucking place that we're incapable of witnessing. And some of it we can, actually. There are ways you can get to seeing certain things that most people don't. That gets back to the senses again. We'll get into that later, but it is possible. Mostly you have to use substances for that, as far as I know. But, I mean, obviously, as I've stated, you can do it yourself via that placebo, that psychosomatic response effect. And that's what time mechanics is getting at. It's utilizing substances to control these behaviors or to program associations that allow for you to make use of these things on your own without any triggering mechanisms, as I've told you that before. But anyways, the truth, the actual reality is that subconscious, that value system beneath the surface that we don't see, that's what's making things happen. That's what's controlling the laws of attraction. That's what's causing for everything. That's what's creating our reality. So that what we call the subconscious, this is where the idea of the ego comes into play again. Humanity thinking that it's on top of everything, loving to think and say, tell everybody. It's basically going to be like one person tells their children, for example, that the parents know everything and that you need to listen to them. And it has that associative parental figure ideology, or that parental figure characteristic that we also attribute to the God figure. That, the God concept, we attribute this parent kind of aspect, and in that, because we assign that value to the God concept, that's where we begin to look at the God concept as though it were like our parents. And this can be very detrimental, especially if you've had abusive parents or neglectful parents. That's the characteristics you're going to assign to your God concept. And that can be very detrimental. That can be hazardous in so many ways, and basically it's just going to slow you the fuck down big time, make everything more difficult. But the truth is that subconscious factor, that value system beneath the surface, that's what's controlling everything, and that is essentially the real God concept. That's the actual happening God figure in play, is this subconscious factor. That's the conscious factor. We are not the conscious factor. We're the subconscious factor. We're looking at it in reverse because that's how we witness things. And, we like to think of ourselves as being on top of everything and all-knowing and the top of the food chain, but really we're at the bottom of the food chain, man. We're the animals that we consider to be lower than us. They're living by nature. They have a perfect understanding of their very existence. They're not lower than us. We're the lower ones because we have this fucking ridiculous ego idea where we consider ourselves to be better than everything else and in control, and we think that we're God's special chosen children, and we're, the Bible tells us that we're meant to to rule over everything. No, what we consider to be the subconscious is the conscious factor. It knows everything. We don't know shit. We're the subconscious factor, and we're trying to wake up. We're trying to illuminate that, and that's going to be the first and most prescient step in this process, is understanding that. That's going to be your big boost. That's what's going to fucking kickstart you and just propel you forward big time, is having an understanding of that as the happening reality from the get. Because that's something that it took us, it took me, and that the others in Foundation, I don't think they even get this yet, but it took me years and years and years to understand this, and it's the simplest and most important understanding you can have, is that we are actually the subconscious factor. What we consider to be the subconscious is the conscious aware factor, and it makes up the world. It's what's creating our reality, so in essence, it is the world. The world is our mind, our subconscious mind, or the world is our superconscious mind, while we, this body, this brain, is the subconscious mind. And it's trying to wake up. And that's what it's going to mean when we talk about awakening. In case, everybody has really wacky ideas about what awakening is and what it means. That's what it means. It means you are dreaming right now. And realizing that you are dreaming, making it real, and looking and reading the world as though it were a dream, that's what you're trying to get at. So that's all the time I have for this one. I'm gonna get baking, and I'll see you guys soon. I have a lot to say, and I got some time on my hands to do it. I got some free time, so I'm gonna bust ass on these. But that's what I got for now, and hopefully that helped. That's really, it's deep as fuck, man. Look at that and really make use of it, and then take that and apply it to other things. Look around in the world and consider everything that you are in fact viewing backwards, and you're gonna get just astounding insights. Anyways, love you guys. Keelah Taerve, siari. Namaste.